Immigrant Maid was mocked by the millionaire until she grabbed the mic and left him falling in love. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are, and subscribe to our channel to receive new stories every day that will touch your heart. I hope you enjoy the story. The Lindbergh Art Gallery, a bastion of marble and glass in the heart of Manhattan, was a world of stark contrasts for Sophia. To the casual observer, she was just a small figure in a navy blue maid's uniform, her movements a blur of practiced efficiency against the backdrop of priceless art. But for Sophia, the polished marble floors she meticulously cleaned were not just a surface. They were a stage for a silent, secret ballet. Her hands, calloused from work, could glide over a canvas with the delicate touch of a ballerina. Her mind, though her body was present, was a million miles away, lost in the ethereal glow of the bronze sculptures that dotted the gallery. Her gaze would linger on the sinuous, fluid lines of a Rodin, her fingers itching to trace the curves and capture their life on paper. She was an artist in a cleaner's uniform, a painter of dreams, sweeping up the dust of reality. Hailing from a small, war-torn village in Ukraine, Sophia had arrived in the States with little more than her dignity and an immense, burning passion for art. It was a secret she guarded fiercely, a fragile dream she nurtured in the quiet hours of her life. The tranquil morning calm was shattered by the arrival of James Lindbergh, the gallery's de facto heir and the 30-year-old CEO of a tech giant. He moved through the hallowed halls of art as if they were a bland conference room, his posture radiating a profound sense of entitlement and ennui. His bespoke suit, tailored to perfection, felt like a corporate armor in a world of beauty and emotion. He surveyed his domain with a critical, almost dismissive eye, his gaze sweeping over the guests and staff with a practiced indifference. His eyes, cold and sharp as shards of ice, came to an abrupt halt when he saw Sophia. She was crouched by a monumental sculpture, the morning light catching the graphite dust on her fingers as she sketched furiously in a worn-out notebook. She was so engrossed in her work that she didn't hear him approach. "What is this?" James's voice, devoid of warmth and tinged with condescension, cut through the silence. He snatched the notebook from her hands with a swift, jarring motion. The suddenness of his action made Sophia flinch, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Shouldn't you be working instead of scribbling like a child?" Sophia's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. She stood up, reaching for her notebook, her eyes pleading. I was just—" James didn't even bother to look at her. He flipped through the pages with a cold, mocking smirk. "Don't bother, I don't expect you to understand." The delicate charcoal lines, the intricate shading, the soul she had poured onto each page, it was all just scribbling to him. "Art is for those with the means to appreciate it, not for those who clean the floors it sits on. Now, get back to your job." With a callous flick of his wrist, he tossed the notebook back at her. The pages fluttered open, scattering her dreams across the polished marble floor. James's condescending laughter echoed in the vast, quiet space of the gallery, a sound as sharp and jarring as broken glass. The sting of his words, the public humiliation, it was a searing pain that burned deep within Sophia's memory. She knelt, her trembling hands gathering her scattered dreams, her head bowed in shame. In that moment, she was not an artist. She was nothing more than the maid, just as James had declared. Little did he know that the maid he had so cruelly dismissed would one day become the very voice that would challenge every single one of his beliefs. The gallery's annual charity gala was a glittering spectacle, a testament to wealth masquerading as philanthropy. For Sophia, however, it was just another night of work, a blur of faces, designer gowns, and polished silver trays. In her simple black uniform, she moved like a ghost, a silent figure weaving through the chattering crowds. She served canapes that cost more than a week's groceries and collected empty champagne flutes, all while trying to make herself as invisible as possible. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of self-congratulatory conversation. James Lindbergh, the man of the hour, ascended the stage, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was a master of the stage, his every move calculated to project power and charisma. He adjusted the microphone with a practiced ease, his face a study in a kind of arrogance that was almost hypnotic. He began his speech, his voice smooth and confident, blending tech-speak with a cynical brand of pragmatism. He spoke of growth margins and market shares, of digital empires and relentless innovation. "Art, my friends," he declared into the microphone, a condescending smirk playing on his lips, "is an illusion." A ripple of polite, amused laughter spread through the crowd. "It's something to fill empty walls, not to build empires. What truly matters is hard work and real wealth, the kind you can measure in dollars and cents." The audience nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting his smug self-assurance. They were a flock of sheep, blindly following their shepherd of success. As James's gaze swept over the crowd, his eyes, sharp and cold, locked onto Sophia. She was standing near the service entrance, a silver tray of empty glasses in her hands, her face a mask of weary determination. A slow, sarcastic smile spread across his face, and he gestured towards her with a flourish. "Look, we even have our cleaning lady here tonight, the one who thinks she's an artist," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. The crowd, sensing a spectacle, turned their heads to look at Sophia, and a new wave of laughter, louder and more cruel than the last, echoed through the ballroom. Sophia's cheeks burned with a sudden rush of heat, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. She probably thinks art can give her dignity, but dignity, like success, isn't found in a paintbrush. It's found in your paycheck. The laughter of the crowd, fueled by James's cruel joke, was deafening. It hit Sophia like a physical blow, each laugh a stinging arrow aimed directly at her heart. Her hands, which held the heavy tray, trembled uncontrollably, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a deep, simmering rage that had been building inside her since the moment she had arrived in this city. Her face, which had been pale with exhaustion, was now a mask of fierce determination. She looked at the laughing faces, at the man on the stage who had just publicly humiliated her, and at the microphone that still hung in the air, a silent invitation. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a sudden, powerful need to act. This was her moment. The moment to speak for every person in that room who had ever felt invisible, for every person who had a dream that was dismissed because of their station. But what would she say? The crowd was still laughing, and James was about to continue. Would it be too late? As James, basking in the lingering warmth of his audience's cruel laughter, turned back to the microphone to continue his speech, Sophia moved. It wasn't a hesitant, timid shuffle of a maid, but the purposeful stride of someone who had just found their voice. Her simple black uniform, a symbol of her servitude, suddenly felt like a battle uniform. The tray of empty glasses she held a moment ago was now forgotten on a nearby table, a small act of rebellion. The laughter in the room began to die down, replaced by a growing murmur of curiosity as people noticed the small figure striding towards the stage. James, still holding the mic, saw her coming. A flicker of irritation crossed his face, a silent command for her to stop and return to her place. But Sophia didn't stop. She reached the edge of the stage, her chin held high, her eyes fixed on his. The silence in the room became absolute. All eyes were on them, the arrogant air and the determined Maid. "What do you think you're doing?" James hissed, his voice a low, furious whisper that only she could hear. He tried to pull the microphone away, but Sophia's grip was surprisingly firm. "I think," she said, her voice trembling but her resolve steel, "that it's my turn to speak." And with that, she pulled the microphone closer, the hum of the live feed suddenly filling the air. Sophia's voice, though initially shaky, resonated with a raw, undeniable power. She didn't shout or scream. She simply spoke the truth. "You said that art is an illusion," she began, her gaze sweeping over the astonished crowd. "I say the illusion is that dignity can be bought or sold, that it is a currency reserved for the wealthy." A profound silence descended upon the ballroom. The air, once thick with self-congratulatory chatter, was now charged with a tension that was almost electric. James stood frozen beside her, his face a mask of shock and bewilderment. He had never been challenged like this, not in front of everyone. Sophia's eyes, filled with a well of emotion he couldn't comprehend, held the crowd captive. "I come from a place where art was often all we had," she continued, her voice gaining strength with every word. "Not to fill empty walls, but to fill our souls, to give us hope when all seemed lost, to remind us of the beauty that still exists in our world, even amidst the ruins." She wasn't just talking about her home in Ukraine. She was talking about every single person who had ever been told their dreams were too big, their hopes too foolish, and their worth too small. The crowd was spellbound. The cynical smiles had long since vanished, replaced by faces of genuine awe. James, standing just inches from her, found himself staring at her as if for the very first time. He saw not the insignificant maid he had mocked, but a woman of immense strength, passion, and grace. "Dreams have no borders," Sophia said, her voice now ringing with an unwavering clarity. "And they don't ask for permission to exist. They belong to everyone, whether you clean the floors or you own the building." Her words hung in the air, a final, powerful declaration. They struck James like a physical blow, a sudden, sharp jolt that rattled his carefully constructed world. He stood there, humbled, exposed, and utterly captivated. The maid he had so easily dismissed had, in a single, breathtaking moment, stolen the show and captured the hearts of everyone in the room. He was left with a single, burning question. What would he do now? The ballroom, which a moment ago had been a cathedral of silence, erupted in a thunderous wave of applause. It wasn't the polite, measured clapping James was accustomed to receiving after his speeches. This was something raw and authentic, a spontaneous ovation for a truth they hadn't known they needed to hear. Sophia, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, offered a small, grateful nod to the crowd before stepping off the stage. Her simple uniform, a stark contrast to the glittering gowns and tuxedos surrounding her. A path parted for her as she moved, the very people who had laughed at her a moment before, now watching her with admiration and respect. James stood on the stage, frozen in place. The cheers felt like a personal affront, a public rejection of everything he stood for. He was the one who was supposed to be celebrated, not the maid he had so callously mocked. The spotlight, which had been his to command, felt searingly hot, exposing him for what he was, a petty, cruel man. He looked out at the audience, their faces no longer filled with admiration, but with a mixture of embarrassment and pity. His attempt to humiliate Sophia had not only failed, but had backfired spectacularly, leaving him standing alone in a sea of judgment. The next day, the gallery felt 1,000,000 miles away from the vibrant, chaotic energy of the night before. James, cloistered in his opulent office, found himself consumed by the events of the gala. He replayed the video of the night's events on a loop, each frame a painful reminder of his own arrogance. He saw the cold sneer on his face, the casual cruelty in his eyes, and then he saw Sophia. He saw the way she held herself, the way her voice, though trembling, never wavered. He saw her courage, a quality he realized with a shocking jolt he had never truly possessed. For the first time in his life, James was forced to confront the emptiness he had so carefully ignored. The art, the money, the power. It all felt hollow and meaningless. The image of Sophia on the stage, a beacon of dignity in her simple black uniform, was a constant haunting presence in his mind. He couldn't shake the memory of her eyes, full of a fierce, unwavering conviction he couldn't comprehend. Driven by a feeling he couldn't name, it wasn't quite guilt, not yet. He knew he had to find her. He had to face her, not as the arrogant magnate, but as a man stripped of his pride. He found her in the gallery's cluttered basement, a space filled with the forgotten tools of labor. The air was thick with the scent of old dust and cleaning solution. Sophia was meticulously organizing a chaotic assortment of buckets and brushes, her movements precise and focused. "Sophia," he said, his voice hesitant, the confident swagger of the night before completely gone. I need to speak with you." She didn't look at him. She just continued her work, her hands moving with an almost mechanical rhythm. "You already said everything you had to say, Mr. Lindbergh," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. James flinched at her coldness. "I know, and I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling foreign and clumsy on his tongue. He had never had to apologize before. "I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I was an idiot." Sophia finally stopped and looked at him. Her eyes, usually so full of warmth, were now as cold and hard as the marble floors they stood on. "You humiliated me, Mr. Lindbergh. You humiliated my dreams in front of everyone. An apology doesn't erase that." A sharp, unexpected pain pierced James's chest. He had been rejected, something he had never experienced. His money, his name, his power, none of it meant anything to this woman. For Sophia, the satisfaction of standing up to him was mingled with a profound sense of unease. What would a man like James Lindbergh do now that she had not only defied him, but also rejected his pathetic attempt at an apology? Would he use his power to make her life a living hell? The sharp sting of Sophia's rejection was an unfamiliar wound for James. It wasn't the kind of professional setback he was used to, but something far deeper, a blow to his very ego and, he was starting to realize, his soul. Her cold, unwavering stare had exposed the hollow core of his life, a life built on numbers and power, not on human connection. He couldn't shake her words. An apology doesn't erase that. They echoed in his mind, a constant painful reminder of his cruelty. But instead of retreating into his usual world of boardrooms and stock tickers, he found himself drawn back to the one place where he felt truly exposed and vulnerable, the gallery. He no longer came to inspect his family's property. He came to observe. From a discreet distance he watched Sophia. He watched her work, her movements precise and tireless, a stark contrast to the languid pace of the socialites who drifted through the halls. He saw the genuine, easy way she laughed with her co-workers, a kindness he had never shown to anyone, and most of all, he watched her during her breaks. He would see her retreat to a quiet corner, her worn-out sketchbook open on her lap, a single pencil clutched in her hand. Her face, usually a mask of professional stoicism, would soften, her eyes lighting up with a quiet, intense passion as she sketched the very sculptures he had so casually dismissed. One particularly golden afternoon, James found her crouched by the bronze bust of a nameless poet, her pencil flying across the page. He watched her from behind a pillar, his heart hammering in his chest with an unfamiliar emotion. He saw the intricate details she captured, the subtle play of light and shadow, the very soul of the sculpture brought to life on paper. He saw not a maid sketching, but an artist at work. A profound sense of awe washed over him, a feeling so pure and powerful it almost took his breath away. He walked toward her, his footsteps quiet on the marble floor. Sophia, lost in her creative trance, didn't hear him approach. He stood over her for a moment, his gaze fixed on her work, his cold demeanor replaced by a look of genuine wonder. "You're an artist," he said, the words a low whisper, almost to himself. Sophia's head snapped up, her hand instantly closing the sketchbook. A flicker of fear and discomfort crossed her face as she saw him standing there. "No, I'm not," she said, her voice small. James shook his head slowly, his eyes still fixed on her. "Yes, you are. I saw your drawings. They're incredible." Sophia's mind raced. Was this a new game? A cruel joke? She said nothing, her body tense and ready to flee. James, sensing her unease, stepped back, giving her space. He pointed to the bust she had been sketching. "Do you know the story behind this one?" he asked, his voice gentle. "It's a replica of a piece from ancient Rome. The artist was a former gladiator who had lost his sight in a fight. He sculpted by touch, relying entirely on memory and feeling." Sophia's surprise was palpable. He wasn't talking about money or power. He was talking about art, about passion, about a story of resilience that resonated deep within her. She found herself listening, her body relaxing, her mind opening up to this new version of James. For the next hour, they talked. He spoke about the history of the gallery, not in terms of its value, but in terms of the stories each piece held. He spoke of the artists, their struggles and their triumphs. Sophia, in turn, spoke about her own fascination with the sculptures, the way she felt their silent poetry. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the gallery floor, James found himself feeling a kind of peace he had never known. He was no longer thinking about his tech company, his stocks, or his social status. He was thinking about Sophia, her quiet beauty, her fierce intelligence, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about art. He was thinking about the way his heart had hammered in his chest when he saw her sketching, the way he felt an overwhelming need to be near her. It was a terrifying, exhilarating, and completely new feeling. But was it real? And could Sophia, who had begun to find herself drawn to this new James, ever trust that this wasn't just a facade, a new and more elaborate performance from a man who had once been so cruel? Weeks melted into months, and James Lindbergh's presence in the Lindbergh Art Gallery became a fixture, though his focus had shifted entirely. His usual sharp, appraising gaze no longer scanned the masterpieces on the walls, but instead sought out a single figure: Sophia. He had become a man obsessed, but not with power or profit. He was consumed by an emotion he had never before experienced, a profound and overwhelming love for a woman he had once seen as nothing more than a servant. He was in love with her intelligence, a mind as sharp and intricate as the finest etching. He was in love with her resilience, a spirit forged in hardship that he found both humbling and inspiring. And he was utterly in love with her quiet, unwavering beauty. One crisp afternoon, he found her sitting on a velvet bench, her gaze fixed on a painting. It was a somber, beautiful piece by a forgotten Russian artist, a canvas filled with a melancholy that seemed to speak to her soul. James approached slowly, his usual confident stride replaced by a tentative, almost hesitant walk. He sat beside her, the distance between them feeling vast and filled with unspoken words. For a long moment they simply sat in silence, the air between them thick with a tension that was both agonizing and thrilling. Finally, James turned to her, his heart hammering against his ribs. The confident, arrogant magnate was gone, replaced by a vulnerable man stripped bare of his defenses. "Sophia," he began, his voice a low, unsteady rumble. I need to be honest with you." Sophia turned to face him, her expression a careful mask of neutrality. She was used to his presence now, but a part of her was always on guard. A small, cynical voice in the back of her mind, whispering that this was all a game. "The reason I've been spending so much time here isn't because of the art," he continued, his eyes, usually so cold, now filled with a warmth that made her heart skip a beat. "It's because of you. I I have no excuse for the way I treated you. I was a cruel, arrogant fool. But I've changed, Sophia, and I changed because of you. I've fallen in love with you." The words hung in the air, a raw, honest confession that left Sophia breathless. James Lindbergh, the man who had publicly humiliated her, was now laying his heart at her feet. It was a dizzying, terrifying, and unbelievably romantic moment. She looked at him, at his earnest, pleading eyes, and felt a rush of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. But the cynical voice, the one that had kept her safe for so long, spoke up. "Words are easy, James," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's your actions that truly matter." James nodded, his expression resolute. He took a deep breath, and his gaze met hers, a silent promise passing between them. "I know, and that's why I'm going to prove it to you." He took a moment, his eyes searching hers for a sign of hope, a flicker of trust. "I want to use my wealth for something that truly matters. I'm starting a foundation, a fund dedicated to supporting immigrant artists. Artists who, like you, have a voice that deserves to be heard, a talent that deserves to be seen. I want to give them the chance to live their dreams." He paused, his voice dropping to a low, intimate whisper. "And the first artist the foundation will support will be you." Sophia's breath hitched in her throat. Her mind reeled, a whirlwind of shock, disbelief, and a fragile, burgeoning hope. James, the man who had mocked her art, was now offering her a chance to live her dream, to make her art a reality. It was the proof she had been waiting for, the one she hadn't dared to hope for. It was a grand, beautiful gesture, an act of redemption that was as magnificent as it was unexpected. But was it enough? Could she truly forgive the man who had hurt her so deeply? And could she, a simple immigrant maid, dare to accept not only his offer but his love? The news of the Lindbergh Foundation for Immigrant Artists spread like wildfire through the city's art circles, a testament to its founder's newfound purpose. James, once the poster child for detached corporate success, had become an impassioned advocate. He used his vast wealth and influence not to acquire more power, but to create opportunities, to build bridges where he had once erected walls. His office, once a sterile sanctuary of business, was now filled with vibrant canvases, portfolios of hopeful artists, and the sound of passionate debate. The Foundation's first and most crucial project was the creation of a private studio for its inaugural artist, and that artist, of course, was Sophia. She now spent her days in a sun-drenched loft, her own brushes and paints replacing the brooms and buckets of her past. The air, once thick with the sterile scent of cleaning products, now hummed with the rich, earthy smell of oil paints and turpentine. One late afternoon, James found her in her element. She was standing before a massive canvas, her face streaked with splashes of blue and green, her hands moving with a graceful, almost frantic energy. She was painting a scene from her homeland, a vibrant, chaotic market square filled with people, a world away from the quiet, polished halls of the gallery. Her passion was a tangible presence in the room, a light that seemed to fill every corner. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, simply watching her, a quiet, contented smile on his face. He had never seen her look so free, so truly alive. Sophia, sensing his presence, turned from her work. Her smile, wide and genuine, was a sight that still took his breath away. "James," she said, her voice soft, "come look." He walked over to her, his gaze sweeping over the canvas. He saw the story of her past, the vibrant colors, the humanity, the beauty she had found even in chaos. He saw the soul she had once poured into her hidden sketchbook, now laid bare for the world to see. Sophia stepped back, her eyes shining. "You did this, James," she said, her voice filled with a profound sense of awe. "You changed. Not for me, not for my art, but for yourself, and for all the artists who now have a chance because of you." James reached out, his hand gently touching her paint-splattered cheek. He looked into her eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at him with such cold, quiet contempt. "I changed for you, Sophia," he confessed, his voice a low, emotional whisper. "You showed me that true wealth isn't about having money. It's about having dignity. It's about knowing how to use your money for good. You showed me that I was a coward, and you gave me the courage to change." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, a dam of emotion finally breaking free. They were not tears of sadness, but of a profound, overwhelming joy. She had not only found her voice, but she had also found love. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, their two worlds, once so distant, finally colliding and becoming one. The story of James and Sophia was no longer just a romance. It had become a legend, a living, breathing testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the belief that people can change. It was a bridge built from humility and courage, connecting two souls and two worlds that were never meant to be together, but now couldn't exist apart. And now, as you've heard their story, what would you do if you had the power to change someone's life? We want to hear your opinion about this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this plot full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you are watching from, and what score you would give this story from 0 to 10, a story that touched hearts. And if you enjoyed the storyline, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming up. See you next time.